Hey, this is Robert with The Lion Show. This episode is one of my favorites. So we get to talk to George. He's been a business coach in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm from, for over 20 years. And we really just kind of vibe. He's a really cool guy. And we're going to basically talk about how to scale up businesses in a very simplified way. And it's just a really cool episode. You're going to learn a lot. We talk about the changes in the marketplace, the different opportunities. It's just one of my favorite episodes. So I hope you enjoy. Be sure to like, subscribe if you're listening on the podcast. Leave us some 5-star reviews. And I just look forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions about anything, send me an email at robert@thelionshow.com. Without further ado, let's get into it.
Hello and welcome to The Lion Show with your host, your favorite business coach, Robert Lyon. Today, we have the great privilege of talking to George Morris. He's a badass. He's been working with digital marketing, helping businesses scale for a long time. He's actually in Boulder, where I'm from, which is a pretty rare thing. So, George, why don't you kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. Well, Robert, thanks for having me on the show. I'm a scaling up coach. Really, what I do is I work with businesses to accelerate their growth, right? And my clients are honestly all over the board. I have clients that are just single people building new teams, all the way up to clients that have 150 employees doing over 100 million in revenue. So really all over the board. My background, like you said here, has been in digital marketing. I had an agency for about 14 years doing software development, digital marketing. Got really involved in the entrepreneur organization, EO, and that changed my life because I got in there working with other entrepreneurs. I realized all the areas where we commonly struggle and all the conversations that come up when it comes to entrepreneurship. And I just love working with entrepreneurs. I could do this in my sleep.
Nice.
If I wasn't paid, I would still do it. I just love it.
And when you were doing your digital marketing agency, what was pretty much like your most successful?
Definitely Imulus, which was my marketing company, right? And the clients that we worked with are typically technology product companies, software companies is what we were working with primarily.
Cool.
And really enjoy doing that. Where I don't have a ton of experience is when it comes to manufacturing. Very little. In fact, I tried starting a company up with 2 colleagues. We went through the Techstars program. And we were one of the second within Techstars that was a physical product company. And man, we miserably failed.
It's hard.
It's so hard. I learned so much about physical product development, but it just gave me a deep appreciation because when I ran a consulting company, I realized that there was a huge limitation in the ability to scale consulting practice, really.
Right.
And I wanted so badly to have a product company. I wanted a software product company. And then I was like, oh, let's try a physical product company. Man, you can scale that. But the amount of investment and time and focus and energy to get a physical product company going, damn, that's hard.
Yeah. And then the margins are small. I mean, sometimes you can, it depends on the product, obviously, but for the most part, you're only making a little bit of money and profit on each one. So you got to be real patient and real determined with a physical product. It's interesting. So you blew up doing SaaS, and were they local companies in Boulder? Like, is that where you kind of did, or did you do it all over the place?
We started there. We started with local companies here in Boulder. The one client that we had was they provided parts for semiconductors. So that was our first client that we worked with. And then we blew up from there. We started working with national companies. And the big mistake we made was working with the Boy Scouts of America.
Oh, wow.
That was a huge client for us. And I had some rules when I ran the business. And one was never to start an engagement with a client that I didn't have a signature on my document, on my contract. Yeah. Because when I was in the dotcom bust, I was working for another company at the time. And this was the new economy, if you remember that. We don't do contracts. We're too cool for contracts. We do handshakes, right? And then the dotcom bust hit, and not having a physical contract, clients we had General Motors as a client, Warner Brothers. They're like, what work? We don't have any work where we agreed to do with you.
Oh, man.
And so when I had my agency, I never moved forward without a contract until we had Boy Scouts. Boy Scouts at the time was I allowed them to make up 80% of our revenue, and we were going to do this 5-year engagement with them. And
Whoa.
they're like, yeah, let's do it. And we're growing and growing and growing. And then finally, we don't get the approval to move forward on a project. Months goes by without the firm approval. And then they come back and say, yeah, sorry, we can't do this work. And man, I had to eat crow, untangle messes.
Quite the conundrum. At least there's a big brand, though. I mean, who doesn't know about the Boy Scouts? Like, that would have been a very interesting project. That's crazy.
Yeah. We were doing great. We were doing great work with them, and for like a year and a half. And they came back and said, "Hey, we want you to be the agency of record. We want to put you on retainer." And we came back with a 4-year agreement, and they came back and said, "We want it to be 5 years, not 4." I'm like, "Great."
Yeah.
And so I started firing clients. I started hiring new talent, and I just found myself in a world of hurt when that contract didn't come through.
Danger zone. Well, that's cool, man. So I'd like to just kind of talk about scaling up. I've been teaching people mostly online, coaching businesses, online e-commerce businesses, just how to scale up. And the simplest form of my system, I just kind of want to get your ideas, is like, first we build the foundation, right? We make sure you have a really good website. You got your CRM properly set up, social media platforms are all ready to go. Then we create an outbound metric to basically generate business. Because I just am a big proponent of, if you can go from like 0 to 1 just from outbound efforts, then you can scale that up. And then you take the money from that and you put it into advertising and marketing and things like that. And that's kind of my system of how I do things. Does that sound right to you, or what are your thoughts? Or do you have like a good way to do it?
Yeah, there's so many different ways to do it.
Yeah, it's a hard question.
It is. And I like the way you're thinking of it. I remember when I left my agency, I sold my share of the agency. A year later, they went bankrupt. But I was working on creating what I called the framework. And the framework is very similar to what you're talking about. I wanted to come in and I wanted to work with businesses to put all the structures in place to allow them to grow, because I just saw so many companies that didn't have the basic blocking and tackling set up to run a business out of the gate. So I really wanted to focus at that time on smaller companies and just getting them prepped, giving them the right tools so they could just take off. And personally, I had a hard time messaging that at the time and distilling that down. Sounds like you've found a way to kind of distill that down.
I still got to get a call and explain it for like an hour to people, but it's getting a little easier.
Right.
Yeah.
So while I was doing that, I had a colleague of mine who was in EO, and he came back to me and was like, "Hey, look, I would really love to get your help doing some sales and marketing work for my company. Would you consult with me on that?" I said, "Absolutely." So I start consulting with them. We're growing the company. And he comes back to me and says, "Hey, look, George, I really want to get outside investment to accelerate the growth of this company, or I want to get acquired. And would you be willing to come in and work with me on this?" Sure. So I bring in a friend of mine who is a traction coach. Are you familiar with EOS Traction?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so EOS Traction does it one way. So he comes in, he helps us, he gets us moving, and then I take over the traction implementation, start growing it.
Mm-hmm.
And before you know it, we get acquired in record time. I thought it would be 2 or 3 years we get acquired. He gave me some equity. We got acquired within a year of getting it implemented. And I went to go work with that other company for 6 months. And then when I kind of lost my shit working with the other company, because we went from a really nimble, fast moving, highly accountable team to a 500-person company based in London. That moved so much slower. Things that would take me 3 days to get done with my original company, I shit you not, would take me 2 months or more to get done with the new company. I could not last in that environment. So I said, "See ya. I'm going to go back to the entrepreneur world."
Right.
But I tell you that story because I'm going to circle it back around. When you think about the systems, EOS Traction is they preach it as what they call EOS Pure, that there's one way to do these systems, and it's a one size fits all. And
it's not true.
Yes, right. There you go. For me, it doesn't work that way. For some people, it does. For me, it doesn't work that way. Now, Traction was based on, when I was in EO, the founder of Traction, his name's Gino Wickman. He was in EO at the same time I was. And both of us had exposure to an earlier system called the Rockefeller Habits by Vern Harnish. And he was the founder of EO, and he found this system. And Gino borrowed ideas from Rockefeller Habits
Cool.
and created EOS. Well, Vern then rebranded Rockefeller Habits into Scaling Up.
Yeah.
And that's what I coach. Now, Scaling Up looks at it as, here's a toolbox I'm going to give you. So, Rob, here's a toolbox of 32 tools.
Yeah.
And when you show up at the job site, you can determine how you're going to use that tool. Are you going to use the tool for framing, drywall, roofing, painting? It's up to you,
Right.
depending on where the structure is. And that's how I come at it. I work with clients and I assess them. And then we
Right.
figure out what is the tool set to use for them at this time.
That's cool.
Wow, that was long-winded.
No, you get the Rockefeller Habits. It just sounds so
Right.
so fancy.
Right. Right.
Well, that's great. So I want to know what are you seeing right now with your clients or just in the industry? You know, I've talked to a lot of marketers, and a lot of marketers are saying, oh, what we were doing isn't working anymore. You know what I mean? There's just not as much frivolous spending going on. You know, so I think there's a huge opportunity, right? Because if you know what you're doing, you're going to kick ass. But I'm curious, kind of like, what are you seeing in the market right now? Or just kind of what are you seeing that's working?
Just wider trends.
Sure. Trends, or just like I said, just working. Like maybe some of you got your clients right now that are still killing it with Facebook ads, or you know, where we've transferred to doing more TikTok ads, Google stuff, YouTube, you know, and then we're also our outbound changed. We used to just do cold call, text message, cold email, and now we bribe people. Basically, we give them a free course or something like that to get them into our ecosystem, you know, and it's just very fascinating what's working. And just kind of how are people scaling right now, I guess, that you're seeing?
Yeah, sure. I see if there was some like macro themes that I see. I actually see a lot of teams going back and taking a look at Google ads and really questioning the ROI on the Google ads. That they're looking at and saying the expense for the Google ad does not make sense in terms of the ROI that they're getting, right? When they look at the cost per customer and the cost per acquisition that they have to get these clients in the door, they look at it and say, this isn't working. So what are some other ways to tackle it? And they're experimenting with other ways. TikTok's one of them, right? Where people are looking at different ways to find their audience and get a good return on investment in getting the audience in there. And what I also see people doing is taking a look at how do we change what we're doing when it comes to inbound, outbound in general, looking at the process, because they realize that the macro conditions are changing.
Right.
And as these macro conditions are changing, they need to go ahead and revisit their processes and revisit what they're doing to see how they're going to do it differently. So I feel like we're right at the beginning of a part where there's a lot of experimentation going on right now.
Yeah.
You know, let's try TikTok. Let's try Snapchat. Let's try doing more cold calls and people actually going back to things that we've left, right? Like, who does cold calls? Like that sounds like me sending you a fax. Like that sounds so archaic, right? But people are thinking about it.
Yeah. Well, everybody's been so digital for so long, and then we forgot, you could go to the farmer's market or whatever and sell something now, you know, and it's just like, you got to kind of get creative. I'm kind of like trying to recreate, like I call it like guerrilla marketing 2.0 kind of, you know, so I'm really heavy into PR right now. I'm finding free ways to do my own PR, which is like exploding my brain and is a whole rabbit hole that I almost wish I didn't go down, but it's working. It's really cool. And then just sending people videos, like, so like for my coaching business now, instead of cold calling and stuff, what I do is I'll go to their website, I'll analyze their website with a recording, and then I'll send them the video and I'll say, hey, look, could you watch this video? I did it. I could probably help you. And it's just a way to stand out in the crowd. And then, you know, obviously with the podcast and stuff, building an audience, having that outbound efforts, and then getting kind of guerrilla tactics, I guess, or whatever it is kind of what I see is going to be the future. And then I always want to keep running ads, but I'm just like throwing money away. Sometimes it feels like, you know what I mean? You just got to get better with the creative, better with the copy, better with the offer. But it also just feels like a lot of the market is tired of all the fancy, crazy marketing things that happen. You know, you put your phone number in and then somebody calls you 8 times a day or something, you know, it's just, it's an interesting place in the market, I see, at least. So
I think you're onto something. You know, my personal take, and I don't have a whole lot of evidence to pull from in terms of research, right?
Yeah.
But my personal take is that we're all getting numb to a lot of the marketing messages and the marketing practices. The idea of like a an Instagram influencer. I think people are starting to see right through that and say, this is bullshit, right? Like, where things have become so engineered around us, we understand that we're being gamed. We understand that we're being marketed to by Facebook, where they're taking our data and reselling our data and parsing us out to find the right messaging. People are getting savvy to that. I believe personally that the way around that is high touch, similar to what you're doing with your videos, right? And I think of, and again, getting creative like you're doing. I think of, sometimes I mess his name up, Russell, was it Brunstrom or whatever, the guy who found ClickFunnels? Yeah, right.
Brunson, right? It was two of them, Russell Branson and Brunson. One's a rocket.
Yeah, I think that's why I screw it up, right? You look at him and what he did with ClickFunnels. He started to do ClickFunnels. He sent leads to Tony Robbins and Dan Sullivan for our strategic coach. And he set up landing pages without their permission to generate leads for both of them. He starts generating all this leads. He caught their attention, and then they started working with him.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Right? It's like
so cool.
Brilliant. Yeah. But I think that's the kind of thing we need to do. I mean, from my perspective, I don't like to put this way. I like to look at it as give first, right? So give to the community, give to the audience. But where we've made the mistake, in my opinion, is that we want to give, but we ask for something in advance of the give. So before I give you my cookie, I want you to write down on a piece of paper your email address and phone number. Like, that's just a weird transaction right there. And I'm like, no thanks. So I don't want the cookie that badly, right? Yeah. And I feel the difference there in the analogy is if you start walking around with the plate of cookies, and you're from Colorado, so you know this, when you go up to Vail and you go ski for the day and you get done and there are ladies walking around with this big plate of hot cookies, it's like, yeah, give me some of those cookies. If you're constantly giving to people, they are then looking for it. They're expecting it from you. Now you're providing real value, and it will come back to you. You just can't quantify it. You can't track it. You can't market to it. You just got to do it.
Yeah. I love that. I also think there was a lack of leadership. Like, I feel like it was too easy for people to make money and not quite give as much as they possibly could. Whereas now it's kind of like the customer has the power more, so we have to give more high touch, be more personalized and things like that. So I think that's where the world is at the moment. It's kind of a totally interesting time we live in.
And it will shift again at some point. We just don't know what that'll look like.
Yeah. So I kind of want to talk about executive teams, and CEOs and leading them. Like, what does that mean? And how do you get in the room with these people that are building these cool businesses? Just kind of give us a little glimpse of what that looks like.
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the work I do is going to come referral, right? Yeah. When I've worked with one business, they like what I'm doing. They're going to tell their colleagues, et cetera, et cetera. And then you just kind of get passed around from one person to the next. Likewise, cool. If I screw something up, it's going to do the same. It'll have the same effect, right? Yeah. So it forces me to always be on point. But when I get into a team and I start working with the team, what I really want to do is I want to assess them. I want to figure out how aligned is the team. And 95% of the time, the team is not fully aligned. They don't know the basics. And I can't speak to specifics with my clients, but I can say I have seen examples where the leadership team doesn't know the very basic numbers that you think they would know in terms of operational goals for the team, the operational metrics that they want to hit. And there's a set of assumptions across the entire team. And it seems to me as if there's so many executives that have these quiet assumptions that they don't speak about because they don't want to appear as being unknowledgeable or wrong. So they don't speak about it, and they continue to operate and react to the day-to-day on the weekly basis. They're looking at issues, they're reacting to issues, looking at issues, reacting to issues, and then they look at it for the month, react to issues. So you're currently always in reactive mode. And what I try to do with them is I try to get them to step back, and I try to get them to create the first thing I try to work with the team is building what I call a meeting cadence. Right? So why are we having a particular meeting? What is the result of this meeting? I'm not talking about like a one-off meeting, like, hey, I got to talk to 10 guys or 10 team members about X.
Right.
It's more about we have a weekly meeting, and at the weekly meeting, we're going to talk about weekly issues. When we get to the monthly meeting, we're talking about monthly issues, quarterly, et cetera, et cetera. And that way it gives you some kind of constraints to talk about the thing that you're talking about. And when we're talking about it, we want to have a clear action. So if you bring up an issue with me, I'm going to clarify the issue with you. Why are we talking about this? What's the significance? And what does a next step look like?
Yeah.
Right. And then once we get the next step, we'll figure out what that is. We're going to move on to the next issue. And then next week, I'll follow up with you to make sure that you actually did the thing that you said you're going to do.
Nice. So it's a lot of leadership and just getting them organized. Because like when you were saying, like they're just constantly putting out fires, like that's not a great way to run a business. You know, you want to be more having a strategy that's growing the business, not just keeping the business like barely alive, you know?
Yeah. Well, I would say that's the difference between the good companies and the great companies,
Nice.
right? And going back to Jim Collins with Good to Great, right?
Yeah.
He looks at, he looked at the concept of the hedgehog concept that he created. And he talks about like the fox, and the fox forages all over, moving around, using a lot of energy, where the hedgehog just does its thing. It's a hedgehog. Yeah. It's not scurrying all over the place. It's focused on doing the one thing it does best. And the great companies do that. They focus on making themselves better all the time.
You have to like kill your darlings. I mean, do you have any other tips, I guess, on just finding your one thing to focus on and just drilling deep? I mean, or is that's what the big companies probably call you to help them do, right?
So Rob, I'll give you a real practical way to think about some of this. So regardless of the size of your team, if you got a small team or you got a large team, the one thing that I think is hugely valuable that comes out of scaling up is this concept of what they call face and pace. So it's a functional accountability chart and a process accountability chart. So I'll break that down for you. The functional accountability chart are key positions: sales, marketing, HR, you name it. These are all the functions. The company internally looks at things as functions, right? Like, oh, that's an HR function, that's a sales function, whatever it might be. But the outside world, the customers don't look at it that way. They experience you with a process, right?
I like that. Yeah, experience.
Right.
You. That's cool.
Yep. They experience you as a process, and that gets into what we call the pace. So we have a process accountability chart. And what so many companies fail to do is they realize they have a process like sales and marketing. So let's take that as a process. Most companies will be like, okay, marketing's job is to go bring in the leads. Sales is going to take them. We're going to sell the lead. We're going to then move that over to the customer team where they're going to service the account. So you got 3 different functions, and they just see it as, you got this, you're going to hand it over. Great. You're going to hand it over. Great. When you look at it with a process orientation, we look at it and say, okay, this process is our customer acquisition and conversion process. Who owns that? Who's responsible for making sure that process runs really smooth? Yeah. And most cases, there's no one there that owns the process. So I'll come in and work with clients and say, let's figure out what are your top 4 to 9 processes in your company that make you unique. And when we understand what those top processes are, who owns each process, what are 3 KPIs that are going to talk to me about the health of that process and performance of that process. And every month, we're going to look at taking one of those processes and running like a Kaizen on it, right? We're going to go through and we're going to make it better. We're going to improve it. And the analogy I give is I have an SUV, and my core processes on my SUV are my engine, my drivetrain, my braking, my steering. That's it. No one gives a shit about my stereo system, my headlights, or any of those other things. They're not core. Okay. And if I want to make my car better, I'm going to go in and I'm going to change the braking, the transmission, the handling, the suspension. Those are core processes that can be improved to make my vehicle or my company better. Wow. Thank you for breaking that down in such a simple way that I had, a little bunch of brain breakthroughs. So that was cool, man. That was really cool. I was looking at your website. So would those be, like you say, for business owners, like you got to go back to like the fundamentals. So would you say like those are the fundamentals, like figure out each process and each system and then who's in charge of that and make them better one at a time? That's basically. Absolutely. That's cool. Absolutely. So let's take, for instance, like that's the customer acquisition process. And this is a question people will usually come back with. They'll say, okay, somebody owns the customer acquisition. So that person owns it. And now we have a function coming down from the top. And so let's just say you have the director of sales coming down this way, and you have somebody here who's in another position, but they own that process. Director of sales says, this is how I run sales. The process comes through and says, well, we need a change on sales because I can't get this process to work without buy-in from the sales director.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we have a stalemate. Well, in that case, it's the CEO or the president that comes in, and he or she hears both sides and makes an executive decision on which one wins that debate. And then you got the stalemate that's broken, and you move that process or that function forward.
Nice. You can map it all out and see where you're going and see where the business is going. That's so cool, man. And are you mostly like, what's your customer avatar? Are you mostly big SaaS companies now? Is that kind of like your bread and butter, or is just any businesses out there?
Yeah, I would say it's any businesses really. You know, and it's any team size. You know, I had this question from a prospect about size of team, and did the size of the organization, does it matter? You know, if I'm working with an organization that's 30 people, or I'm working with an organization that's 1,000 people, honestly, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't really get caught up in that because the executive team is usually a handful of people. It's usually about 7 people, and I'm coaching the owner, the president, the CEO, and their team. Now, they all have different responsibilities, and the numbers that we bring to the table and the level of sophistication of that executive team is different.
Yeah.
But they still run into the same human issues of ego, vulnerability, poor communication. They happen throughout the spectrum.
Yeah. Well, it's just the human condition, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You considered an implementer. I want to know, like, how did you become such a badass implementer? Like, actually, that can get shit done, right? It's hard. It's fun to, you know, talk business, but then to actually get things done and get people to do things. Like, do you have any tips or just insight on that?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm a badass. I hope to be right. I hope to become known as a badass implementer. That'd be a great brand. But I do like to execute, and for me, really, what it comes down to is I love the experience of various processes of various companies. I love the experience that the company has the potential to get to, and often we're not at our potential. So I'll come in and I'll look at the way something runs, and for me, it actually causes like a level of anger, or I would say frustration, when I see a process that could be better, and it motivates me to make it run better, to make it work better.
Get it done. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, why are we doing it this way? So if you really want to light me on fire, get me involved with a government process.
Right.
Oh my God, my like every fiber of my being is like, let me at it. Like, move out of the way. Just get out of the way. Let me get my hands in there. I want to work with you to fix this. Come on, let's all make this run better. And so when I see a system that's not running well, it just drives me to make it better. And that's uniquely me. Other coaches come in and they're optimizing more for, say, revenue, and they're really focused on that, or they're looking at overall employee happiness. And so for me, I'm much more of a systems guy, and communication and functioning well as a team.
Yeah. Well, you're the scaling up guy. You know, they can help them be happy. And
love,
if you scale it up, man, you got to be an implementer to scale a business. So you're basically just coaching now. Are you still running an agency or anything like that?
No, I don't have time to. I don't have time to do that. I mean, I'll say when I debated going into doing scaling up, I was debating on starting a company, doing something with the educational blockchain. And I had other colleagues that had businesses, sold their businesses, and became coaches with scaling up or traction. And they all convinced me. They're like, George, stop, don't go starting another business. Go take a look at this. We think you'd like this. And I'm like, I don't know. You know, I don't know if I would really enjoy that. And then when I got in here and started working on, I'm like, oh my God, thank you guys. Like, you saw something that I didn't see, right? So I love it. I often think about in the future if I will start another business up just because of what I now know around the systems approach. If I could actually start a business from scratch and build a rapidly scalable business from scratch, it's always a curiosity of mine, but I don't know if I'll go there or not.
That's also like the curse of the entrepreneur. You're like, oh, I could build
right.
this next amazing business. Have a new baby. Yeah, squirrel brain. That's my problem. Well, that's so cool though, man. Well, I love that you're in Boulder and that you've just been crushing it, helping kind of businesses in that area. It's a lovely place to live, man. So it's just such a cool thing that you're being a coach and you've been doing this now for 20 years. What has kind of made you stand out, you think, or helped you kind of develop into who you are? Like, how have you stand out in the marketplace? I guess you did a really good job for one person. You said they recommended you to other businesses. Is that kind of how you did it?
Yep. I would say for me, one of the things I learned around all of this is stick true to who you are, stick true to what you believe is going to work. Yeah. And don't try to please everybody, right? Like there's just going to be a certain audience, a certain subset of potential customers that they're not going to want to work with you, and don't bend over backwards to getting them to work with you, because it's not a win-win, right? Like if I have a client come to me and they're myopically focused on one thing that I don't personally see the value in focusing on, that's cool. There's plenty of other coaches out there, plenty of other implementers that will help them. Yeah. I'm not that guy, right? So I'm really clear on who I want to work with. Yeah. And how we resonate with each other. Yeah. And when I had my agency, I tried pleasing everybody. I wanted to get everybody as a client.
Yeah, it just kind of burns you out, and then you can't focus on the good clients as much as you wanted to. Yeah. It is the struggle of sales and then also implementing all the things that you want to do for businesses and stuff like that. Yeah. So
well, the businesses that you work with, right? When you're working with your businesses, what do you see as common challenges that they run into?
Well, right now, it's really confidence. They're unsure in the marketplace. They're just kind of like, we want to do something different, but we're not making as much money as we used to all the time. And then it's just trying new things. Like they've been kind of stuck in their ways for so long, and then now they're kind of struggling and they need to do something, but they haven't been keeping up to date and they don't know what to do. Whereas they have to pivot a little bit to, maybe spend more money on ads or just kind of figure out how to add other incomes into the business or just try and grow. I was with a couple of different coaching businesses that were just killing it on TikTok, right? And they were just crushing it organically on TikTok, and they were just printing money. And then now that stops and they're kind of panicking and they're trying to figure out, what do we do? But yeah, so it's mostly, a little bit of unsure in the industries right now, a little bit of unrest, new pivoting moment right now. You got to figure out what's going to work, what's going to do. And it's really mostly just, let's come back to basics. And like when I step into these businesses, I'm like, okay, well, what was your best month last year? Right. We look at whatever that best month was, and I simply say, well, let's do that again. It's like they need to create a little creative part in their business where they're going to focus on experiments and trying something else. And then it's just interesting. And then also hiring people has changed. We went from people coming in the office to everybody's on Zoom now. And there's like those balances. It's hard because people are good things and there's bad things about having everybody on Zoom. It's like, are they actually doing all the work, or are they like, what are they doing? Are things getting done? And then I don't know. A lot of people I feel like, I don't want to bash employees or anything like that, but they're just kind of lazy. It's like they're still working there, but they quit a long time ago. They just show up and do the absolute bare
quietly minimum. Quitting.
That's what it is. Yeah. But I'm trying to kind of do another thing where I help people start online businesses. And that's kind of where my focus is, because there's not too many people that are actually willing to help people launch new businesses and do new things. So
there's a huge need there.
Yeah, that's kind of a market that I'm stepping into. And I'm excited about it, actually. It's just trying to pick out the best focus, like niching down, I guess, is my biggest issue right now, is like, how do I either just help one sort of client? Like it would probably be, coaches and content creators if I just niche down. But I love working with new businesses. I love learning new things. And whenever I get the opportunity to step into these new businesses, I learn so much. And then I actually help them because I have my own tactics and my own skills of getting clients and things like that. So that was a long-winded answer too. But, it's just, there's burnout, there's lack of confidence, there's a need to pivot in the marketplace. And then there's finding good talent. People need talent, and that's pretty much what the main things are that I'm seeing though.
and from you asked earlier about like just the macro level stuff, and that's what I'm seeing is that there's still a high level of turnover.
Yeah.
You know, I think we're past COVID, or you know, if we're ever
be.
past COVID, I don't know, but you know, we're out of what we were in, and people are more mobile now, and there's still turnover.
Mhm.
And I hear from my friends that own recruiting companies that they have all this demand. In fact, so many of my friends that own these recruiting companies, they're turning away work because they're like, we can't find quality people to fill the jobs.
Mm.
And I was talking to my one buddy who has a recruiting company, and he said, right now, the trend looks like people are going to have 4 to 5 different careers over their lifetime. And I asked him, I'm like, well, what does that mean? Right? Like, you know, I started out with programming, and then I moved to a project manager, and then I was an AE for a little while. And I'm like, so is that 3 careers? And he's like, no. You just moved in position. You're in the same industry doing the same thing, just your position changed. He's like, I'm talking about career pivots. I'm talking about going from a financial analyst to a programmer to a sales executive. And he's like, people are doing that 4 to 5 times right now in their lifetime.
Mhm.
And to me, that underscores a huge importance when it comes to our ability to retrain ourselves and ongoing education. And I also have a theory that so many of these people are leaving their workforce as full-time employees and becoming more gig workers, setting up their own shop, right? So it goes back to what you're saying, that you see a need in helping people start their businesses and getting the right tools set up. Because if I'm an accountant and I leave my position working for some company as a controller or CFO or whatever it might be, you know, I come out and go on my own. What do I know about marketing? What do I know about CRMs? What do I know about any of that stuff? So
It's
I
interesting.
think you're on point to find a pain point.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that everybody is going to have multiple careers, and they're shifting and they're growing. But I was talking to another guy recently, and it really got me thinking. So he's an outbound sales guy. So he comes in and builds a whole outbound sales team. And he's seeing that the technology is getting so advanced that the employees don't know how to use it. And then the people above the employees don't know why they're using all of it. And then they're getting mad, and they used to just like, you know, cram more butts and seats to do more dials and more outbound stuff. But it's just kind of the rapid changing pace that eventually all the marketing technology is going to get so advanced that we're not even going to know why we're using it or how it works and how to fix it. It's just such a weird thing to think about.
I've had, like I said, the company that acquired us when I was helping my buddy's company out, we had a really nimble sales process. And so we were using ActiveCampaign, and ActiveCampaign was a great tool. We have all of our leads come in through ActiveCampaign. We create a real simple funnel. We created very few but useful automations. And the sales team would just go in there and move leads around, track them. Everything was beautiful. It worked really well. When we got acquired, now again, we're dealing with a much bigger organization, 500 people, whatever it might be. But the subset of that organization that was the sales team, maybe 15, 20 people. Right? Like we went from a small sales team, but to 15, 20 people, that's not a big sales team.
Yeah.
And they created this Salesforce system that you had to jump through so many touch points, so many hoops, that the sales personnel, they're looking at it, you know, the BDRs, they're looking at it and they're saying, like, this is just so convoluted. Like, I'm just gonna use Excel and a notebook.
Go back to the basics.
Exactly. And even from a marketing perspective, there were teams dedicated to keeping the engine going that was doing all the tracking, all the reporting, all the analysis, all the fixing. And I just step back and I'm looking at it and I'm like, does this make sense the way we're doing this? Right? Because you still can't tell me from a lead acquisition perspective where that lead came from. So whatever dollar I put out there and whatever marketing effort I put it towards, you can't tell me with a high degree of certainty where that lead came from what output I put out there into the market.
Yeah.
And so you create all these tools for that. the amount of money that you spend on the tools and the personnel and the time to try to figure that out, to me, is, if it's not done right and it's too complex, it's a waste of money. It's getting in your way, right?
You got to simplify things, man. That's why I loved what you said earlier. Just kind of know your numbers, clarify, and then have everything breaking down and find the bottlenecks and have someone to run that operation. That's just like,
Well, look at Harley Davidson. They're a great example. Harley Davidson used to have something like 54 people that touched the motorcycle from start to finish till it went out the door. They've reduced that down to 5 people. So there's 5 people that touch the motorcycle, and that team that does that work now, rather than being individuals specialized on one aspect of the motorcycle, they're more generalist. So they're able to impact the cycle at multiple points, which makes them feel more like a human being rather than a machine.
Yeah.
And the process moves better because you have less human touch points, less chance of error, less chance of mistake.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. That's so cool. Well, I love having you on the show today, man. We've chopped up a lot of amazing stuff. I sadly have another interview at the top of the hour, but I got 2 questions that I ask everybody that comes on the show before we kind of wrap it up.
Do I need a drum roll?
Yeah. No, but before we get into that, how can people kind of get into your world? How can they learn more about you? Like, where are you most active on social media and online?
I would just say go to my site, gmorris.com. I typically write a lot with blogs, and I've been using LinkedIn a hell of a lot more. I'm not a huge fan of LinkedIn, but I like it as a tool for the audience that I speak to.
Yeah.
And I'm also on Instagram here and there, but I'm usually LinkedIn, and my blog is what I typically write and communicate with people on there.
Yeah, actually, I kind of want to talk to you about your blog, because I love it. I was reading it a little bit. I was getting in there, some good stuff.
Oh, thank you.
So do you write all those? Do you have like a writing habit or anything like that?
I write all of it myself. I try to write content on a regular basis. I love writing content. I always underestimate the amount of time it's going to take to write content. Yeah, I'll sit down and say, it's the editing, the refinement, the documentation. So I'll sit down and think, oh, I got an hour. I'll just rip something out. And then 4 hours later, I'm like, oh, it's done.
Yeah. It's a good looking blog though, man. It's cool. It's kind of funny. Like a lot of coaches have the go outside and hike as their kind of theme that you do too, but you're actually in Boulder, so you're actually doing it. So
yeah, I'm out there.
You're out there. I
I
wonder what it is. It's just climb to the top of the mountain. It's it's like business, or it's like
we're
too much in our office, so we need to go dream about being outside.
There's something to that. There's something to it. When we walk, we actually activate different points of our brain, so we think clearer when we're away from the office. And then so many people talk about, you look at Jim Collins and the idea of a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal at the top of the mountain, and we're going to go through all of our points. That's not by chance, because Jim Collins, he actually lives here in Boulder as well, and he's a fantastic rock climber.
Right, he started it.
Maybe we have Jim Collins to blame for it. Maybe.
Yeah, there you go. That's good stuff. So the first question I ask, it sometimes catches people off guard, but for reference, I'm writing a book about money. So I just got to ask, do you have any tips on making more money, or, how to lose less money? Just any tips on money that might help the listeners out there.
Yeah. Don't invest in crypto right now. In terms of making more money, to me, I guess I don't look at it with the end goal of making more money. I did for a long time. A lot of my career, I was chasing the dollar. And when I was chasing the dollar, it felt elusive to me, as if I was chasing a chicken around my backyard, right? Like I could keep chasing, I just couldn't catch that damn chicken. And the moment that I was able to step away from that and focus on what actually do I have that is real value that I can give to others. And once I was to focus on that, thinking like the hedgehog concept, once I could focus on what value do I really have to give to others, the money side took care of itself. And so I think for most of my career, I was chasing the wrong thing. I was chasing the dollars and looking for the dollars, and it became more elusive. The moment that I focused on giving real value to people, the dollars just came right in, no problem.
Powerful. Mic drop right there.
Yeah.
The other question that I ask everybody is, what motivates you? What gets you really fired up? What gets you going?
It's similar to what I said earlier. It's experience, it's process. I just get so fired up with that. I also get really fired up when I see a team that has amazing potential. I see the potential. We know there's potential, and they keep getting in their own way. And it's just, it motivates me, because I'm just like, God damn it, right? Like, if you can just see this, if you could just see the potential that you guys have, and what am I doing wrong that I'm not able to show you what that potential is, and what do I need to do to really clarify it for you? I don't look at them as the problem. I look at it as me in terms of my skill set and my ability to communicate, and what can I do better, differently, to get the team to see, and hold a mirror up to the team so they have that aha moment and they see things a little bit better. I'll give you a real quick example of one thing that I love. I had a team where two executives were kind of at odds with each other, and they didn't really relate all that well. I was trying to do a team building exercise. So what I focused on was the lifeline exercise, where you go through your life and you highlight your highs and your lows, and you share. It's a vulnerability exercise. But I was doing that because I wanted them to open up, and I felt that if they could open up, they would see each other a little differently, and that would impact how they function as a team member. Well, unknown to me, both of these people broke their backs when they were teenagers. Like, I don't run into many people that break their backs, honestly.
Yeah.
And they made a full recovery. And so they both shared that they both broken their backs, and they immediately had a connection there. They immediately understood each other at a different level, because they both went through that same unique past. In my experience, I lost my father when I was 14. So when I connect with another individual who lost their father when they were young, I immediately get something about them. I know them. And so that connection is what will enable better performance, because you have rapport. So going back, what fires me up is looking for ways to get the team to see their values, see their potential, and drop all these damn walls that we have around us that stop us from performing at our best.
That's powerful. Yeah, the ability to go deeper, to kind of get past the surface level and then be able to work with people on a common goal. Like, that's powerful.
Yep.
That's awesome, man. All right, well, I got to know, what is the ENFP 7 persuader in the corner? What is that?
Yeah, so if you are you familiar at all with like Myers-Briggs or DISC or anything like that?
Yeah.
Each one of our profiles tells us something different about how we view the world, how we act in the world. So ENFP is tied to Myers-Briggs, right?
Oh,
right. So number 7 is tied to Enneagram. Persuader is tied to DISC profiling. And then the number set that's in there is Colby. So there's similarities in all 4 of those numbers that I have.
Yeah.
It's entrepreneurial, quick start, adventure seeking. It also means my weakness is sometimes starting things too quick without getting all the data, reacting too quickly, lack of appreciation for due diligence. So understanding these things, and I talk to my teams about this, the executive teams, and we understand how we think, how we view the world, what stresses us, what motivates us. We're able to better communicate as a team.
I mean, yeah, if you know yourself, or if you know other people, it's powerful. As a high level business, have you actually noticed if you do people take those tests and then you put them in spaces where they're supposedly, like, according to the test, supposed to do good, do they actually do good? Does that make sense? Yeah, personality wise. Absolutely. I just always think they're funny, but if you really see it works, man, if it works, it works, right?
I would love to give you a demonstration of it. So like the one that I really like in terms of the seats and everything else is DISC profiling. And my colleague, Chris Young, he's out of North Dakota. He's been doing this for 22 years, and the guy nails it every time. But he can take a look at a DISC profile. You give him 10 of them, and you say, this is my team. And my team works pretty well. And he'll look at the profile, and he'll be like, this is your sales guy. This is your marketing. This is your controller. And he'll nail it. He'll nail it just based on the profile.
That's
Yeah.
super wild.
And it's really wild. And then you can create, we got a really rudimentary Excel sheet. I'm going to try to make it into an application online,
Yeah.
but you add criteria. So it'll give you 16 different measures, and you say like things like attention to detail. How important is that? So you say very important, right? So you go through all 16 of these questions, and at the end, it's going to create a composite disc profile.
Yeah.
And when you look at that and you look at somebody that actually succeeds in that position, there will be overlap. So the minute that you say attention to detail, you've just disqualified me. I am not going to be attention to detail.
Yeah, I was like,
right?
I'm not. That's me.
Yeah, I'm not that.
I want to be, but
right. And you don't want me doing your bookkeeping. I can assure you that.
That's so cool that you dug into that, because I've always felt like it was kind of like, hiring people on their horoscope. But if there's science backed stuff, that's pretty badass, man. That's cool.
Yeah, disc profile is science backed. In fact, we were talking about it just last week, and there's this company out of Arizona called TTI. Yeah. And they actually have now all of the testing that ties to disc is all science based, and they now have a system there. If you show up at their facility, they can put a skull cap on you, and they look at your brain's patterns, and they can show you your disc profile and say like what you'd be excellent at just looking at how your brain's moving.
I'm gonna have to go do that now. That's crazy.
It is crazy, and you're right there in Arizona, so you can do
I gotta go.
Yeah.
That's so fun, man. Well, it was great having you on the show today, man. I think we could chop it up forever. But
we probably could.
Before we wrap it up, any last thoughts or anything else you want to share with the audience?
No, I mean, I would just go back to the audience, and I would say, look, if you can at an early stage in your company, if you can avoid certain things early on, do it. And I think one of the things that people can just get really clear about is process. Yeah. It sounds so boring, and God, I know it's like me sitting here talking about like legal case studies or something like that, but if you can get into the beauty of your processes and what makes you unique, and you can dial that in on a regular basis, damn, you're going to have a real competitive advantage over other companies if you do that at an early stage.
That's very powerful. Very smart. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Be sure to leave us some comments. Share this with somebody who wants to learn more about business and how to work on their processes and be badasses, implementing everything. I think it was a great show. I'll talk to you guys in the next one.